The dinner party was the turning point. I hadn't realized how much things had shifted until she made that one offhand comment. It was subtle, but it stung. We were standing in the kitchen, me trying to balance a plate of appetizers and her talking to some friends. I hadn't noticed how much her tone had changed over the last few months. How it wasn't just about the big stuff anymore, but the little digs, the condescending smiles, the way she'd make sure everyone knew I wasn't the sharpest in the room. Honestly, she said, laughing to the group, sometimes I wonder how he manages to keep it all together. I don't know how he does it, the group chuckled. I froze, the plate suddenly feeling too heavy in my hand. She wasn't being cute, wasn't trying to be playful. It was dismissive, a jab. I forced a smile and tried to shrug it off, but inside, it burned. You know, I said, trying to join the conversation, I guess I'm just good at faking it. They all laughed again, and I played along, but the words felt hollow. It wasn't just the joke that hit me. It was the fact that I hadn't been enough for her for so long. I'd been fading, but I hadn't realized it until that moment. I glanced over at her. She was still talking to our friends, completely oblivious, her laugh bright and loud. But something had shifted in me, something clicked that hadn't before. I couldn't even remember the last time I felt like I mattered to her. I should have said something, stood up for myself, but I didn't. I just quietly moved into the background, out of sight, out of mind. I didn't want to make a scene. And that's when I realized maybe I'd been doing that for a while, just letting things slide, because it was easier than confronting it all. The rest of the evening went by in a blur. Everyone was talking, eating, having a good time, but I felt like I was watching through a window. She didn't notice. Later, in the quiet of our apartment, I thought about how much she'd changed, and how much I had too. How many times I'd let her make those little comments. How often I'd brushed off her condescension like it was no big deal. But now it was. I wasn't the man she had first met. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself. Not because of one big moment, but because of all the little moments where I let her dismiss me, where I let her pull away until she didn't even have to see me anymore. And in that silence, in that stillness after the party, I realized I was done. Done trying to make her see me. Done being the one who laughed it off. The person I wasn't here anymore, not for her. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed her approval. Maybe I'd been sidelined in the relationship long before tonight. Maybe I'd known it and just didn't want to admit it. But now, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something inside me had finally snapped. The next few days passed like a blur. At work, I found myself putting in the same amount of effort as before, but something had shifted in me. A colleague stopped by my desk one afternoon, smiling like he had a secret. "Hey, that presentation was solid, really clear. You've been stepping it up lately." I was taken aback. For the first time in months, I felt that rare, unforced sense of pride. It didn't come from her. It wasn't about making her think I was impressive. It was just me, standing on my own. I nodded, thanking him, but inside I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I mattered. And I hadn't even realized how much I'd been depending on her approval to validate me. When I got home that night, the usual routine kicked in. I made her tea like I always did, even though she never asked, never seemed to notice. But this time, as I stood in the kitchen, I hesitated. Why the hell was I doing this? She didn't care about it. She didn't care about me. I put the kettle down and left the kitchen. She didn't say anything when I didn't bring it to her. She wouldn't have noticed anyway. Later, we sat down for dinner. The conversation turned into one of those casual digs she loved to throw at me. "You know," she said, poking at her salad, "it's kind of impressive how easy you are to keep." Seriously, I don't think I've ever met someone who doesn't demand much. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that, but this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't even respond. I just kept eating. The words still stung, but they didn't sink in the way they used to. I wasn't looking for her approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for her validation. It was strange, but freeing. I hadn't realized how much I had been shrinking in her shadow, how much of myself I'd lost to make her happy. After dinner, I went to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection. I looked different, older, tired. My eyes were dull, and for the first time in a long time, I saw how much I had changed, not in the way she wanted me to, but in the way I had allowed it to happen. I had been disappearing, little by little. Every time I ignored my own needs to please her, every time I let her belittle me, I shrank a bit more. But not anymore. I looked at myself, really looked at myself, And I wasn't that guy anymore. The one who did everything, bent over backward, just to make her happy, just to make her think I was enough. I wasn't that guy. Something inside me shifted, quietly, almost imperceptibly, but I felt it. I wasn't going to let it keep happening. I wasn't going to fade into the background again. Not for her, not for anyone. I turned away from the mirror, feeling a quiet kind of resolve settle in my chest. The next step wasn't about confronting her or making a scene. It was about reclaiming myself, slowly, steadily, in ways she wouldn't even notice at first. But I would. I was done fading, and I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual, and laced up my old running shoes, the ones I hadn't touched in months, maybe years. It felt strange at first, like I was stepping back into a version of myself I'd forgotten. But as my feet hit the pavement, something clicked. The cool air, the rhythm of my breathing, the simple act of moving without anyone's judgment or expectation. It was mine. I didn't run for her. I didn't run for anyone. I ran for me. By the time I got back to the apartment, I was sweating and out of breath, but I felt a small sense of victory. It wasn't huge, but it was a start. Something was changing inside me, and it had nothing to do with her. She didn't notice, not at first. The next morning, I was out there again, running, not to prove anything, but because I wanted to. My body felt different, stronger somehow, but my mind felt clearer too. After a week of running, she finally said something. It was the kind of comment that made me wonder if she even really saw me anymore. She said, eyeing me over the top of her coffee mug. You've lost weight. That's nice. I guess I didn't even feel the sting. I just nodded, grabbing my coffee and walking past her. She didn't get it. She didn't get that I wasn't doing this for her, or for anyone but myself. It was the same with everything else. I started dressing differently. I'd stopped wearing the clothes she always liked, the ones that made me feel like I was playing a part in a life I wasn't really living. Instead, I pulled out shirts I used to wear before we'd met, things that felt like me, not like some version of me she thought I should be. She didn't notice that either. When she did comment, it was the same dismissive tone. That shirt's a little tight on you, don't you think? Like I was making some kind of mistake, like I didn't have the right to feel comfortable in my own skin. I didn't say anything back, I just let it go. But something inside me shifted again. I was more aware of how little she was noticing me, how little she cared. I started spending more time on my own, doing things I enjoyed that I had neglected for so long. I picked up the guitar again, even though I wasn't any good. I read more. I watched movies by myself. Simple stuff, but it felt like reclaiming small parts of me I'd abandoned. She didn't care. She barely even looked up from her phone when I picked up the guitar. Playing again? She asked without much interest. You always were bad at it. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that, but it stung less now. It didn't even feel like a personal jab. It felt like a reflection of how she didn't even know me anymore. Not really. It was like I was invisible to her, fading more and more into the background of her life. She'd never been the best at paying attention to me, but now it was worse. She was so caught up in whatever world she had in her head that she couldn't even see the small changes in me, the things I was doing to take control of my life, to stop letting her shape who I was. And it made me realize she wasn't seeing me at all, not the real me, just the version of me that existed to make her comfortable, to feed into her routine. The more I pulled away, the more I saw how much I'd let her control the narrative of my life. I'd been part of her background, her scenery, but I wasn't that guy anymore. I wasn't going to just sit around waiting for her to notice me, waiting for her to see I was still here, still a person worth paying attention to. I had to start living for myself. And if she didn't see that, fine. But I wasn't going back to the way things were, not for her, not for anyone. Or the work event was the last place I wanted to be, but she had insisted. It was one of those corporate mixers where everyone pretended to care about each other, exchanging pleasantries and meaningless compliments. She was in her element, charming everyone in her usual way. I, on the other hand, felt like an accessory. Just another thing she could show off to make herself look good. At least, that's how it had always felt. But tonight was different. We walked into the venue together, and she slipped her arm through mine, a practiced move, like we were still that couple everyone envied. She introduced me to her colleagues with that fake sweetness she reserved for public appearances. "This is my husband," she said, her voice too bright, her smile too wide. "Isn't he just the best? Always so supportive." I nodded, offering a stiff smile. I could see the looks from the people around us. They weren't looking at me like I was her appendage anymore. They were seeing me. For the first time in a while, I felt like I stood on my own. It wasn't much, but it was a revelation. They weren't just looking at the guy who was lucky enough to be with her. They were looking at me. Not because she'd introduced me with some grandiose speech or praised me. No, it was because something in me had shifted, and I wasn't hiding behind her anymore. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. As the night went on, I found myself slipping further away from her, wandering into conversations with people I didn't know, and feeling a strange kind of freedom. She was wrapped up in her own world, talking about work, making sure her little social circle was pleased. It was as if I barely existed. But it didn't matter. Not tonight. I was talking to a guy from her department when she found me again. She slipped in next to me, draping herself on me like we were a couple of newlyweds. But her eyes weren't on me. They were scanning the room, already looking for someone else to entertain her. "You know," she said, her voice barely audible over the music, "he's just lucky to be here. I mean, what would he be doing if I hadn't pulled him into this world?" The words were casual, almost like an afterthought. But they hit me like a slap. I looked at her, not even bothering to hide the sharpness in my tone. "I used to believe that too," I said, my voice colder than I intended. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. She blinked, her eyes narrowing in confusion. I could tell the comment had thrown her off, but she quickly masked it, trying to recover with her usual charming laugh. "Wow," she said, putting on a show for the crowd around us. "Touché." But I could see the flicker of discomfort in her eyes. She wasn't used to being caught off guard like that. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. I wasn't going to get into it with her here. The moment had passed. The people around us went back to their own conversations, but the weight of her words lingered between us. She tried to change the subject, but I wasn't really listening anymore. I could see how much she was trying to pull me back into her orbit, but I wasn't biting. Not now. Not ever again. Something had shifted and she felt it. That brief, quiet moment of discomfort, when I didn't let her control the conversation, when I didn't play the role she wanted me to. It rattled her, but she didn't know what to do with it. Neither did I. I didn't care anymore, and that made all the difference. We spent the rest of the night in silence. She danced her way through the crowd, pretending like everything was fine. But I could feel the subtle shift between us, and it was like something that had been holding us together. Some invisible thread was beginning to unravel. She wasn't seeing me anymore, not the way she used to, and now neither of us was pretending. I started spending more time away from her. I'd been getting back into the things I'd always enjoyed: sports, reading, hanging out with friends, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time: relief. I didn't have to be around her constant chatter, her passive-aggressive comments, or her silent disapproval. I was finally living for myself again. It wasn't even about her anymore. I didn't feel the need to prove anything to her, but she noticed, of course. She had to. One evening, she made an effort to sit down with me after dinner, her voice suddenly soft, like she was trying to find a way back in. "How was your day?" she asked, pushing her food around her plate, not quite meeting my eyes. I shrugged. "Fine." Silence. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy. She tried again. "Did anything interesting happen at work?" "Nope." Another beat of silence, longer this time. She was trying to bridge a gap that had grown too wide. It was so obvious. She was trying, but she didn't know how to connect anymore. Maybe she never had. I didn't offer more. I didn't fill the void. I just let the silence hang. It was strange the way the air between us felt thinner now. I could see the little things she was doing, the attempts to pull me back into the life she once expected us to have. She cooked dinner more often, made sure it was something I liked. She'd even tried to make things more intimate, trying to create moments where we could talk, like we used to, before everything got so lost. But it all felt forced, like she was ticking boxes instead of genuinely trying to reconnect. I wasn't cruel. I didn't call her out, didn't make her feel small the way she had with me. I wasn't angry, but I couldn't pretend either. I wasn't interested in playing along with her attempts. One night, she handed me a plate of food she'd made, something she hadn't cooked in months. "I know it's not much," she said, her eyes searching mine for some kind of approval. But I thought you'd like it. I looked at the plate, then back at her. It wasn't a bad gesture, it wasn't even a bad meal, but I couldn't ignore the fact that she'd never made that kind of effort before, not unless something was off between us. And now, all of a sudden, she was cooking for me like she was trying to fix things. Thanks, I said, cutting into the food without really tasting it. She smiled a little too brightly. It wasn't real. I wasn't buying it. I noticed the way she was shifting, though. The way her behavior was changing. She'd started doing things like picking up after herself without me asking, not just when company was around, but all the time. She'd compliment me, small things here and there, but they felt rehearsed, as if she was checking off a list of how to win back his affection, rather than doing it out of any real interest. I didn't feel grateful for the effort, because it made me realize just how little she had done before, how little she'd ever done, even when I'd been giving all of myself. I kept thinking about the way I just slipped into the background of her life, how much I'd let myself shrink to accommodate her, how much I had sacrificed just to stay in her good graces. And for what? So she could play the role of the perfect partner while I was left fading into the background? I started feeling a quiet sense of empowerment, like I was finally awake to the reality of things. She wasn't the one who'd been holding everything together. I had. I had been the one doing all the emotional labor, making sure everything was fine, making sure she was happy. But now, I wasn't doing it anymore. I wasn't stepping into the shadows of her world just to make her comfortable. I wasn't jumping through hoops to make her feel like she had me under her thumb. And as much as she tried to turn things around, it didn't feel right anymore. Because what I was starting to realize, what I was really starting to see, was how much effort she'd put into controlling me and how little she'd put into actually seeing me. I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I wasn't going to be the guy who bent over backward, trying to get a sliver of attention from someone who only ever gave me breadcrumbs. Not when I was finally starting to see myself again. The gap between us was only getting wider, and it wasn't just because of the things she'd done. It was because of the things I'd let her do to me. And now that I was waking up to it, I wasn't sure how much further I could let it go. It was late when she finally approached me. I'd just gotten home after a long day, my mind buzzing with work and everything else. But she was standing in the living room, her arms folded, her face tight with something I couldn't place. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice hesitant, like she wasn't sure how to start. I glanced at her, then dropped my bag by the door and took a deep breath. "Sure. What's up?" She hesitated, searching for the right words, before sitting down on the couch and patting the seat next to her. "Things have been off for a while now," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like we're drifting apart. I think we should work on it." I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, watching her. She wasn't crying or upset, not exactly. But there was something in her tone, something calculated in the way she tried to present this as a problem we could fix, together. I sat down, leaning back, and folded my arms. I was tired, physically, emotionally, but there was no denying the growing distance between us, the way she was trying to act like it was all just a bump in the road. "I don't think it's that simple," I said, my voice flat. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even upset. I was just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of bending for someone who hadn't even noticed when I was shrinking. She looked at me, a little taken aback, but kept going. "I know I haven't been perfect, but we can still fix this. I've been thinking about it a lot. We can find a way back to what we had." I stayed silent for a few seconds, letting her words settle in the air. What we had? I didn't know when it happened, but we had stopped existing as a partnership a long time ago. I didn't even recognize the version of myself she was talking about anymore. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I don't feel the same anymore. I don't think I can just turn it back on. The way things used to be, it's not there. She stared at me, a frown forming, confusion and frustration flashing across her face. "What do you mean? You've changed. You're different. You didn't used to be like this." I looked at her, not angrily, just matter of fact. "Maybe I've changed because I've had to. For too long, I've been trying to be the guy you wanted, the guy who could make everything work for you. But I lost myself in it. And now, I'm not sure who's left." Her eyes narrowed, and her voice became sharper, almost defensive. "So, what? You're blaming me for everything?" I shook my head slowly. "I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying, I can't keep pretending like it's fine when I've been losing myself. I don't know if this is something we can fix, but I'm done chasing your approval. Her jaw clenched. I could see her trying to hold it together, her attempt to keep control of the situation slipping away. You've changed, she repeated, her voice quieter but no less accusatory. You didn't used to be like this. You didn't used to give up so easily. I stayed calm. It was hard. God, it was hard. But I wasn't going to let her twist this. I wasn't going to let her make me feel guilty for wanting something different. Maybe I've changed because I finally stopped trying to make you happy when you don't even notice when I'm miserable. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than anything I'd said before. She looked at me like she was waiting for me to take it back, but I didn't. She didn't respond immediately. I could see the frustration building in her, the confusion. She didn't understand. She thought this was a phase, that all we needed was a little more effort, a little more time. But the truth was, I couldn't keep going back to someone who didn't see me. She finally stood up, pacing the room as if looking for something to fix, some way to reel me back in. I don't understand. Why can't you just try? Why does everything have to be so difficult? I stayed seated, feeling the shift between us. It wasn't about blame anymore. It was about recognition. She didn't get it. She didn't get that I had already moved on, that I had already let go. I can't keep pretending like this, I said quietly, my tone firm but not cruel. I've been trying for too long. But I can't fix this for you. She stopped in front of me, her expression a mix of frustration and confusion. So, that's it? You're just giving up? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence between us stretched, thick with all the things we'd never said before. But I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. I wasn't looking for her approval. I wasn't going to beg her to see what had been broken for so long. She finally turned away, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I could tell she was trying to process everything, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I didn't have to make her understand, not anymore. And as she walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there, I felt something in me solidify. It wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness. It was a quiet, resolute decision. I wasn't going to chase her approval anymore. Not ever again. The weekend getaway was supposed to be a chance to get away from everything, to reconnect, she said. But it felt more like a cage, the walls closing in on me, pressing tighter with every hour that passed. We were up at a cabin in the mountains, the kind of place she thought would fix whatever was wrong between us. She didn't get it. It wasn't about the place. It wasn't about the weekend. It was about us. And there was nothing left to fix. Saturday afternoon, we sat on the porch with glasses of wine, the air crisp and cold. She was leaning back in her chair, staring at the view, but there was that same distance in her eyes. I could feel it again, the subtle weight of her disappointment, the way she was always just waiting for me to be what she needed me to be. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. She broke the silence with a laugh, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. You know, she said, her voice light but sharp, you're really lucky to have me in your life. I mean, look at this. Not everyone gets a weekend like this. I froze. The words hung in the air, a mockery of everything that had been between us. She'd said it so many times before, but now it hit differently. I could feel my chest tighten. I had been lucky, sure. Lucky to be with someone who saw me as an accessory to her life. Lucky to have spent years trying to keep up with her expectations. Lucky to be treated like I didn't matter. I set my glass down, my hand gripping the edge of the table, and turned toward her. No, I said, my voice firm, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. You're the one who's been lucky. I've been the one trying to prove I'm enough for you, trying to keep up with your needs. And it's never been enough, has it? She blinked, looking at me like she hadn't expected me to fight back. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. I've been lucky to have you. You've been lucky to have me, because I've spent the last few years doing everything I could to make this work, to make you happy. But you've been too busy focusing on everything else to notice that I've been suffocating. My voice was tight, controlled, but the anger was there, simmering just beneath the surface. She sat up straighter, a little defensive now. What are you talking about? I've been here with you, haven't I? I've made this relationship work. You're the one who's changed. She paused, her face tightening. Are you seeing someone else? The words hung in the air like a challenge, like she was daring me to bite, to fall into her trap. I could see the way her mind was working. trying to twist the conversation, to pull me back into the same old dance. But I wasn't going to play, not anymore. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not seeing anyone else. But I've been seeing how little I've mattered to you, how little you valued me. And I'm tired of pretending I don't notice. I'm not interested in playing your game anymore. Her face fell. I saw the flicker of panic behind her eyes, the realization that she wasn't in control anymore. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off, my words sharper this time. Don't make this about me. Don't make me feel guilty for not wanting to keep fighting for something that isn't real. We're not a team anymore. We haven't been for a long time, and I can't keep doing this. I took a breath, letting the silence settle between us, the words hanging heavy in the air. I'm done. She stood up, pacing the porch now, her face flushed, her hands shaking as she tried to form a response. But there was no response left to give. She didn't know what to say, because she'd never understood what it had been like for me. She hadn't seen the slow erosion of everything I had been, everything I had sacrificed just to keep us going. You're just going to walk away from this? She asked, her voice rising, the frustration clear in every syllable. You're just going to give up? After everything? I didn't move. I didn't need to. I've already given up. I've been giving up for a long time, but now I'm finally seeing it for what it is. I'm not your project anymore. I'm not your fixer-upper. You want me to be the guy who makes you feel good, who supports you while you walk all over him? I'm not that guy. Not anymore. Her breath hitched, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. She tried to find something, anything to say, but all that came out was a shaky, I don't understand. I love you. I've always loved you. I shook my head, feeling the weight of it all finally lift. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love the part of me that you can control, but you don't love me, not the real me. And I can't keep pretending that I don't see it. She took a step back, like she was physically recoiling from the truth. I could see how shaken she was, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. You need to stop treating me like I'm not enough, I said, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. Because I am enough. And I've been enough for a long time. I just didn't see it until now. She didn't say anything after that. She couldn't. There was nothing left to say. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of everything I'd carried between us finally fall away. The days after the weekend getaway were tense, but I didn't feel the weight of them the way I had before. The confrontation had shattered something between us, and I knew it. I could see the cracks widening, but I wasn't going to try to fix them. She tried. I'll give her that. After a few days of quiet, she started making small gestures, as if she could pull everything back into place by force. She cooked dinner one night, something she knew I liked, and asked me if I wanted to watch a movie. She made it sound like she was trying, but there was no warmth in it, just an agenda. Do you want to watch that movie we used to love? She asked, her voice tentative, like she was waiting for me to say yes, to take the bait. I glanced at the TV and then back at her, feeling the distance between us grow with each passing second. No, I think I'll just read, I said, getting up from the couch and grabbing a book from the shelf. It wasn't that I didn't want to spend time with her. It was that I wasn't interested in pretending anymore. She paused, a flicker of disappointment crossing her face. But she didn't push it. She just nodded, retreating into the kitchen, busying herself with the dishes. I could hear the clink of plates, the sound of her trying to reassert control, trying to make everything feel like it used to. But I wasn't there anymore. I wasn't playing her game. I watched her from the corner of my eye, noticing how hard she was trying, how she was clinging to the idea of us, to the idea of a relationship that had stopped working a long time ago. She didn't get it. She didn't understand that this wasn't about fixing things. It wasn't about trying harder or cooking my favorite meal or asking if I wanted to watch some movie. It was about seeing me for who I was and recognizing that I had been giving everything while she just took. The more she tried, the more I realized how much she'd only been holding on to the idea of me, not the actual person I'd become. She wasn't trying to fix us because she wanted to. She was trying because she was afraid of losing control, afraid of being alone. I put my book down and just sat there for a minute, the silence pressing against me. It was strange how the air between us felt thinner now. Like we were both walking around each other, each too afraid to confront the truth. but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already detached, and I was finally seeing it clearly. This relationship had run its course. I wasn't going to keep pushing against a wall that had never moved. I wasn't going to waste any more time trying to hold something together that wasn't meant to be. She came back into the living room after a while, sitting next to me on the couch. Her presence felt distant, almost foreign now. She wasn't the woman I had once loved. She was a stranger, someone who had never really seen me. She wanted me to be the man she needed me to be, but I wasn't that man anymore. "Why are you acting like this?" she asked, her voice soft but strained, like she was trying to find something in me that wasn't there. "I'm trying, you know." "I'm really trying to make this work." I didn't look at her right away. "You're trying to make your idea of this work, not what it really is," I said, my voice steady, but the truth cutting through the air between us. "This isn't about you trying harder. It's about us not being who we used to be, and I can't keep pretending that things are the same." She was silent for a long moment, and I could see the realization flicker across her face. It wasn't anger, it was confusion, mixed with hurt. She wasn't understanding, though. Not really. She thought she could win me back with small gestures, like she could patch up the cracks with enough effort. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough for her anymore, and I wasn't sure I had ever been. I finally looked at her, the weight of everything we'd been carrying for so long pressing against me. "You're not fixing anything," I said quietly. "You're just scared of losing control. You don't love me. You love the version of me that made everything easier for you, and I'm not that person anymore." The words stung, and I saw it in her eyes. I saw the hurt, the confusion, the realization that she had lost me. But I wasn't going to take it back. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. I stood up, leaving her sitting there, the space between us growing wider. I didn't need to say more. There was nothing left to say. She called after me, but I didn't look back. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to try to fix something that had broken a long time ago. Her attempts to reconnect weren't about love. They were about fear of losing control, of losing the one person who would let her dictate everything. But I wasn't going to be that person anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. I was finally free from the weight of her expectations, free from the relationship that had drained me, free from the need to prove I was enough for someone who never truly saw me. The shift had happened, and I wasn't going back. The next morning, I woke up early, just before the sun hit the windows, and I knew. It wasn't a thought or a decision I had to force. It was just the inevitable conclusion I'd been avoiding for too long. I could feel the weight of it in my chest, that quiet understanding that this was the end. She was still asleep, the soft rhythm of her breathing filling the space between us. I looked at her, and for the first time, in what felt like forever, I didn't feel a need to explain myself, to apologize, or to stay. I had tried for so long to make this work, to convince myself that there was something to save, but there wasn't, not anymore. I stood up, grabbed the bag I'd packed the night before, and made my way to the bathroom. I didn't make noise. I didn't try to wake her or say goodbye. I couldn't do that. I left a note on the nightstand, simple and to the point. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I need to be on my own. Take care." I didn't explain myself further. She knew what had happened. She knew what had been broken, even if she hadn't fully admitted it. As I walked toward the door, I felt a strange kind of calm. There was no anger, no regret, just peace. I wasn't angry with her anymore. I wasn't even angry with myself for letting things go on this long. I just knew that I had to leave to find myself again, to rediscover who I was when I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's world. I didn't look back when I closed the door. The air felt different as I walked out, clearer, like I was breathing for the first time in ages. It was early, the world still quiet, but it felt like a new beginning, one I hadn't realized I needed until now. I wasn't the person I had been when I met her. I was no longer the guy who had felt like he was lucky to be with someone who made him feel small. I wasn't lucky anymore. I was strong, and I was enough. I pulled my phone from my pocket as I walked down the street. There were a couple of missed calls from her, but I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't need to hear her trying to pull me back into something I'd already walked away from. I didn't need to justify my decision. It was done. I didn't know where I was going exactly, but I didn't need to. I had just left a life that had confined me for so long, and in that moment, I knew that this was the first step towards something different, something better. And as I walked into my new life, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. I wasn't the man who thought he needed her approval anymore. I wasn't the man who felt lucky to be with someone who never truly saw him. I was free,